We're going to talk about what has happened in Ukraine on this day of the Russian invasion. We'll examine the actions and the strategies, both military and political. Now, if this is your first time watching, my name is Darren Gertis. I'm a professor who's built multiple leadership programs at Charleston Southern University. So we'll also view these events through the lens of leadership. And I also wrote a book about Zelensky called I Need Ammunition, Not a Ride, and you can find it on Amazon. Okay, so on day 93, here's what's happened in Ukraine. Lyman is a city in Donetsk, and it's completely fallen to the Russians. Actually, it fell over the last couple of days, but it fell on one side of the railroad tracks, and then the railroad was a railroad station was taken, and now the whole area around Lyman is taken, and so it's pretty much in Russian control. Now, the problem is that it leads to other cities. If you go down here to the southwest, what you're going to see is that there are other cities down the road that if you can control Lyman, you can then control the other cities. And if you control these other cities, then you can start to control other cities that will start to encircle the Ukrainian troops that are trying to hold off the Russians from capturing all of Luhansk. Yeah, so that's really what the issue is here. So the Russians now have control over that area. If the Russians can push south from Izum, I think that's how you pronounce it, and Lyman, simultaneously pushing forward from the bottom from the Popasna. If you go north from Popasna simultaneously, they can box in the Ukrainians. And so that's going to be hard for those defending Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. And that could potentially be very game changing for the Russians. And so you got to be really careful. If you're the Ukrainian army, you have to monitor the situation very closely. Russians now control a small portion of the city of Severodonetsk, and they're boxed in on three sides. And this is going to become a problem if they allow them to be overwhelmed. Now, they can always fall back to Lysychansk. Now, if they fall back, they're falling back over a river up onto high ground. So that's good, but you don't want to fall back unnecessarily and just cede territory. But they can still do that. Okay, in Kherson in the south, Kherson was taken early, and so it has very little damage compared to some of the other cities because it was a matter of a week or so, and they swept up from Crimea into Kherson. Russian powers have been there occupying for months, and they've decided that they're going to re-educate children about the special military operation and trying to Russify them. Now, all teachers were ordered to Crimea to take training, and their teachers refused to participate, so good on them. Russian leaders were optimistic also, not just about taking the Donbas, but there was a report that they were very optimistic about even capturing Kyiv by the end of the year. That sounds strange given their actual progress, but apparently that's what they think. During the day, Zelensky gave three speeches. The first was to the foreign policy community of Indonesia, and he talked about the global food crisis. Now, this is a legit thing that there's going to be a global food crisis because Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. If you knock out the grain from Ukraine and Russia, because remember, Russia's under sanctions, and you take that away from the rest of the world, there goes 30% of the world's wheat supply, as well as a big chunk of corn and soybean and other agricultural products. So the people that are going to be affected by that are hundreds or thousands of miles away in poor countries, and that's going to be a problem. The second speech, he talked to Stanford students, and now I talk about this in the book. That seems like a poor use of his time, but he's really media savvy, and he's speaking to these students knowing that the press is going to amplify whatever he says. So it's just another venue. It doesn't really matter who he speaks to. He could be speaking to a parliament or to a government official or to his own people or just broadly to the Russian. But the press is going to take and amplify what he says. So he's speaking to the press. He's speaking to his people. He's speaking to them. He's speaking to the press. He's speaking to his people. He's speaking to the enemy at the same time because they're paying attention to whatever he says. So he recognizes that he's speaking to multiple audiences at the same time. In my power and influence class, I use one of the books that I use is "It Worked for Me" by Colin Powell, and Powell explained the same thing, that when he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he understood that he was speaking to the reporter, the American people, the political and military leaders in other countries, as well as the enemy and his own troops. So Zelensky's aware of this, and he does a masterful job, speaking to multiple audiences and staying on track. He keeps pounding the same thoughts in every speech, right? So, for example, he talked about the admissions essay at Stanford, and he says, everyone who studies at Stanford is equally familiar with the question, what matters to you and why? To study at your university, you need to write an essay response to this question. That's a direct quote. And he answered his own question, laying out his own objectives. And then he just talked about his own objectives, which are weapons and sanctions and finances and bringing war criminals to justice. So he does this very well in every speech, and it doesn't matter the venue. At the same time, today, President Biden spoke to graduates of the Naval Academy. He told them that actions taken by Putin were an attempt, to use my phrase, to Finlandize all of Europe, to make it all neutral. Instead, he NATOized all of Europe. Now, I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden, but he's absolutely right. Think about all the things that have happened to Europe since Putin invaded. Like, if Putin was trying to keep Ukraine neutral, he just made Ukraine more pro-European than ever before, more anti-Russian than ever before. Finland and Sweden are both joining NATO because they're now going, we're not NATO, so we're not protected either. And if you're Finland, you're really nervous because you share a border with Russia, and so they're joining NATO. It's all breaking the other direction than what Putin was wanting from this. Okay, so that's all that I have right now. We'll talk about day 94 tomorrow. Hey, if this video was helpful, hit like to help others find it in YouTube's algorithm. Subscribe so that you can stay informed. And one more thing, if you are moved to contribute to the humanitarian aid for Ukraine, I have a link below for Samaritan's Purse. If you want to give, be sure to give only to reputable organizations. There's a lot of scammers out there. Thanks for your time.